Okay, by now you probably have filled out the teacher form, the one where you list the behaviors and any additional information that you can. It's called a PTR form, the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce form. I also had a video that went along with it, and hopefully you were able to take a look at the video if you needed to. In any event, so that form, once it's completed and once we've reviewed the identified behaviors, I take that information and I create a form, what's called the ABC form. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's the antecedent behavior consequence form. Now, typically these forms, you just have boxes that have a label of antecedent behavior and consequence. And then these are left blank and you basically are asked to fill them in. What I do is I take the identified behaviors that we have identified and I label them and then I define them and then I fill this form out to make it as easy as possible for staff to take data, because this information, this data form is one of the most important data collection tools we utilize, because it kind of sets the tone of what type of data I will need to take. It also will help me identify patterns. It also will help me to identify which behavior is more prevalent. It can also, most importantly, will help me identify antecedents, which are, of course, what happens right before the behavior, and also consequences, which may be actually reinforcing the behavior inadvertently. Okay, so let's just kind of look through this. So we have our student here. I filled it in, Jane Doe. And down here, I have listed target behaviors. So the first one we've identified is elopement. And I have the definition: attempting to leave the classroom and attempting to run in the hallway and exit the building. Elopement is different than, say, like out of area noncompliance. Out of area noncompliance, you will sometimes see on my form. That's for more of when the child is so supposed to be at their desk and they go over to the carpet area. I don't typically categorize that as elopement. Elopement is the child attempting to leave the classroom and leave the building. Okay. So moving on, so we have elopement, then we have aggression, any unwanted attempted physical contact with an adult towards any part of their anatomy, i.e. grabbing a staff arm and digging her nails into the staff's arm. Also includes kicking or attempting to strike any person in an attempt to cause harm. The next one is verbal aggression, and I have it abbreviated VA, which I'll explain why here in a minute. So verbal aggression is growling or stating no towards peers in an angry tone, may include calling peers names and or threatening to cause harm to peers, or to the peers' belongings. I should say belongings. Okay. But then I have work refusal, non-compliance. Okay. Typically, I just will name this non-compliance. Sometimes I will put work refusal if that's something that the team has identified as an actual named behavior. I will add that as well. I had that abbreviated as well, which again I will explain. So non-compliance will verbally state, no, I do not want to do my work, and or engage in other behaviors such as pacing the room, going to the back of the room, sitting at a desk or floor with arms crossed over chest and not responding to teachers' redirects or supports. Okay? And then we have agitation. Eyebrows in a downward position, increased breathing rate, i.e. audible breathing sounds, clenching fist and or putting head down on desk, may lay down on the floor, and or begin to take items out, such as manipulatives out of their containers, may include crawling on the floor, attempting to disrupt the class. Okay? So there we have our behaviors. And then what I do is I take those behaviors and I put them down under the behavior column. Okay? And a couple of them are really long names, so I just kind of abbreviate them. So we have verbal aggression, VA, noncompliance, NC. Okay? And then, so we have our elopement, which you see from here. We have our aggression. We have our verbal aggression. Okay? We have our noncompliance. We have our agitation. And then I have other down, because sometimes if you're not really sure about the behavior, let's say the behavior was something that you're just not sure if it was listed on here. Let's say spitting. We'll say spitting, you're not sure about it. Just list it just check other and just write spitting next to it. And then I can kind of go back in and be able to identify where it would fall under, okay? So what you do first is after you get to familiar with the identified behaviors, is you come over here and you just kind of keep this paper somewhere accessible in a classroom. Because again, this paper is only you would only use if and when the behavior occurs. Um, and I typically like this data collected approximately 5 days. It's not as time consuming as you think it is because, again, you're only recording when the behavior occurs. And you can actually just when the behavior occurs, you can check it off real quick. And then if you want to add any comments, you can come back to it later. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. But you want to make sure you put the date, if you can, the time. If you can't do it at that moment, after class, if you can come back and put an approximate time, that would be great. And then your initials, okay? So presented, engaged, and tasked, okay? That means that the student is either engaged in an activity or told to begin an activity or to work in a group, okay? Or they're engaged in a class discussion, they're engaged in group work, they're engaged with putting things away, or actually that putting things away would actually fall under transition as well. Believe it or not, you can have one or two of these checked off at the same time, okay? There's no right or wrong when it comes to this form. There's absolutely no right or wrong answers. You just fill out the best you can, and I guarantee you it is pretty close to perfect. So let's say that the student was engaged in a class a quiz. So a quiz would be engaged task. So you would just put a check mark or an X, whatever is the easiest. Or you can even list what they were doing, or you can list it later. You don't have to. Just say engaged in a task, okay? And let's say the student was non-compliant, engaging in work refusal, stating, I don't want to do it, started pacing the room. You would then come over to the non-compliance and you would put a quick X mark. Let's say they were also, you saw agitation. You could also mark agitation down. Let's say you also saw some verbal aggression, that they started being mean to the people in at their table. You can mark that one as well. You can have one or all of these marked. It just depends on the situation. And again, you just put quick little check marks or X marks on it and just move on. And then the consequence, let's say, that's just basically what you did in the situation. If you ignored it, you put an X in the ignore. If you gave verbal redirect, you would put an X here. If they were, let's say they didn't get to perform the task, you just ignored them because you didn't want to elevate the behavior anymore, and you were going to send give them a zero on the task or have them do it at a later time. You can check off activity terminated, okay? And then later on, or in that moment or later on, it doesn't matter, you can come back and put any type of comment you want to, okay? You can tell me what they were doing, what tasks they were engaged in, or you can just leave it blank. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you feel comfortable doing. The more information you give me, the more it's going to help me understand, which then will help me build a stronger support program that will then in turn help that student in your classroom and will help me paint an accurate picture of the behaviors. So this is basically all you do. Now there's a perceived function component here, and that is totally up to you as the teacher. If you would like to check that as well, you do not have to, because I can take a look at the behaviors and I can kind of determine the perceived function. But if you have an idea, let's say you know the student really did not want to take this test. They do not like this subject. They were not prepared. They did not want to take this test. Then that would be escape avoidance. Obviously, it would be that they wanted to escape taking the test or the quiz. But again, this part, perceived function, you can fill it out. It does help. Do not feel like you have to. And again, there are no right or wrong answers. Don't worry about whether or not if you check the right or wrong box. If you give me some information, if you're unsure, give me a little information, I will be able to figure this out, okay? And again, this form is pretty simple. You do it, approximately 5 days. I'll usually tell you how long I'll need it. I want to be able to get a good idea, a good pattern. Um, and then that's it. And then the rest is up to me. Observation, if there's a latency data, an interval data, but any other data, uh, anecdotal, whatever it's going to be, direct assessment of that student will be done by myself. Okay. This is one of the only forms I will ever ask a teacher to do for me. And in the previous schools I've worked for, it was anybody from the teacher of the classroom, gen ed teachers, to paraprofessionals, to aides, to guidance counselors, to anybody that works with that student, specials, art teacher, gym, music. This is something that we would utilize. And again, it's very easy. It's not time consuming at all. It's very quick. Behavior occurs. You go in to the antecedents. You can check it off real quick, or just make a little note to yourself. And then when the class is over, come back and fill it in. Not a big deal. I find it's easy just to keep it on a clipboard, near you, wherever you are, on your desk, or just kind of somewhere. I don't typically put the names. I did for this one, but typically I'll just put either abbreviations, or if they're in a gen ed classroom, I won't put the name here until it's turned in, and then once it's turned in, I will put the name in so I make sure I know who the student is. Um, so if you have to keep it kind of out in the open, that student doesn't know you're taking that data on them, and the other students won't know as well. But again, it's very simple, it's very easy, but it is extremely critical in the functional behavior assessment component. I can honestly say that I will not do functional behavioral assessments 99% of the time without doing an ABC, data collection by staff. This is absolutely critical. But again, very simple. And I'm always happy to help if you have any questions. I'm always happy to walk you through some of them. Um, you know, uh, the, um, I'm very collaborative. I want to be able to help the team out, but this is just so important, this data sheet. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me or always stop me in the hallway, and I will be more than happy to help you out with any questions. And again, this is a very short-term data collection form. It goes by very quickly, and then the rest of the data collection I am doing. Okay? Thanks so much.